What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the reveal of the number 26 team in my 2021 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Carolina Panthers. This is a super young team with a ton of potential, and there's going to be some Panthers fans that probably think this ranking is too low, which with an optimistic outlook on this team, it's going to be too low. But there are a lot of young pieces and question marks as well. So it's going to be a really exciting deep dive. Before we get started, please do hit that like button down below. It really does help support this video and the entire series. You guys have been showing up big time with that, so thank you. Also, if you're new, if you enjoy the breakdown, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You're not going to want to miss an upload as we count down to number one throughout the rest of the summer. But let's go ahead and get started. The Carolina Panthers, as I mentioned, almost a boom or bust team with how much youth and explosiveness this team has, and almost overperformed in a lot of ways. Last year was a team many expected to be competing for the number one overall pick, and they didn't. They were highly competitive. They were right there in it with some of the best teams in the league. It's just a matter of getting over the hump and not only learning how to close close games, but also maybe win a few blowouts here and there as well, like the great teams do. But yeah, this was a busy offseason for this team, as you would expect for a team that is in a bit of a rebuild of sorts. So the quarterback change, of course, Teddy Bridgewater out, Sam Darnold in, and that Sam Darnold variable here is going to be so massive as far as how this 26th ranking plays out. And we will talk about that polarizing variable here shortly. But the rest of the roster here, Mike Davis on his way out, no issue there, as Christian McCaffrey could potentially be listed as an addition here after he missed most of last season. Russell Okung out at left tackle. That's going to be something we're going to have to take a look at there, that key left tackle position. Curtis Samuel as well out, that big playmaker in the slot. I think they're hoping Christian McCaffrey's return can replace some of that. K'Wan Short, some veteran leadership, not so much impact at this stage in his career. He has definitely regressed, but he is on his way out. Again, he only played 3 games last year, so not a huge loss there, but I think from a leadership aspect, you got to take a look at that. Trey Boston as well, a veteran leader. I wouldn't be stunned if they bring him back if he hasn't signed elsewhere. But then Rasul Douglas had a very up and down season, gave up a ton of big plays, so Panthers fans probably aren't going to miss him too much, especially with some of those additions at the cornerback position. And then Corn Elder is the slot corner from last year who went to Detroit. So a lot of departures here, but some big additions as well. We mentioned Sam Darnold. You're bringing in David Moore and Terrace Marshall, a couple of bigger-bodied perimeter receivers to be a vertical presence there. And then on the defense, they add Hassan Reddick, who's going to be an interesting piece in Matt Rule's kind of hybrid defense here. Going to play a combo edge, outside linebacker cover role. J.C. Horn, the big draft pick, number 8 overall. Heavy expectations, going in the top 10 for a cornerback. Can he live up to those? We'll talk about that. And then A.J. Bouye as well, bringing in some veteran leadership to this secondary that really kind of needed it. So a busy offseason. We are now going to dive into this roster, breaking down each position group, how they stack up against the rest of the league. And that is going to start with the quarterback conversation, which is a big one here. And when the Carolina Panthers traded for Sam Darnold, there was big debate as far as, was this a good move for the Carolina Panthers? Because let's face it, Sam Darnold, in the first 3 years of his career since getting drafted 3rd overall by the Jets, he's been a bad NFL quarterback. There is absolutely no denying that. However, the New York Jets have literally painted the prototype of what not to do for a young quarterback, which is 2, bad coaches, at least from an offensive coordinator play calling standpoint and player development standpoint on the offensive side of the ball. A bad offensive line, to say the least. Just pathetic receiver play. He's had a good slot guy in Jamison Crowder, who's missed about half his games. And he had 1 year of Robbie Anderson, who's far from a number 1. He's the number 2 here in Carolina, ironically. And he hasn't even had a good running game for the Jets. He's had nothing to support him. I firmly believe that you put Trevor Lawrence with what Sam Darnold had for the Jets, he would not succeed. It was that bad. So You rip him out of that, and you hope that you can rekindle the optimistic outlook he had 3 years ago coming out of USC, where myself and many people had as the number one quarterback in that class, which was a really good quarterback class. So my answer is yes, this was a good trade for the Panthers. I was talking all about how David Tepper, coming from Pittsburgh, understands that you need that high-end quarterback to be a consistent Super Bowl contender. He wants this to be a championship organization, and he made a move that he sees as something that's not going to cripple the future of this team if it doesn't work out, but also has high-end potential. He went through Teddy Bridgewater last year, who was fine, but witnessing him take checkdowns on fourth down and constantly come up short on third down, it just wasn't getting the job done. And Sam Darnold's a guy that can make those plays. You just hope the structure stuff that Teddy Bridgewater had does show up a little more with Sam Darnold here, now putting him with Joe Brady, who's one of the emerging high-end young coordinators in the league, a better receiver than he's ever had in DJ Moore, now making potentially the best receiver Darnold ever had in his first year with the Jets. He's number 2 receiver here, and we'll get into this receiving core, but they've got help there. You hope the offensive line steps up, a situation that's much more conducive to developing Sam Darnold finally. So he's got the traits, man. I do believe it's comparable in some ways to Josh Allen, who at the same age of Sam Darnold had that big breakout for the Bills last year. He's got one similar trait, and that is that natural athletic feel in the pocket. He does sense pressure. He does know when to hang in there, when to get out. He had extraordinary pocket presence at USC, in my opinion, and you pair that with the natural arm talent. No, he doesn't have an elite, strong arm, but he certainly can put the ball wherever he wants, whenever he wants. So the traits are there. You hope working with Joe Brady, smart young kid, he can develop some of the structure stuff that has just been so hit or miss with the Jets. So I do believe in Sam Darnold. They're going to rank 23rd here for the Carolina Panthers. You got to keep in mind, this series is a full view 32-team look. I can't just project a perfect, almost have a bias towards the Panthers. This is an optimistic outlook because Sam Darnold has not been the 23rd best quarterback in the NFL in his time. So I am definitely projecting growth here and to prove a lot of people wrong in a lot of ways. But I also can't just simply project a best case scenario for the Panthers because you can do that for every team, right? We've talked about reasons for optimism with every squad, and I have to keep a balance there. But 23rd here for the Panthers with Sam Darnold. I love the trade, and despite Panthers fans probably going to be angry at the 26th power ranking, do try to take some consolation in the fact that I do believe in the future of the Carolina Panthers. And I think I'm just going to say, a better than not chance that Sam Darnold becomes the franchise quarterback here. Now, that's, maybe 52% yes, 48% no. It's a risk. He was available for a reason. There is a lot of growth to have here, but I am a Sam Darnold truther, if you will, and I do think that this is a much better situation for him. It's just a matter of, can he still be saved, or did the Jets ruin him entirely? Can't wait to find out. You do have PJ Walker here, another quarterback I'm a truther of. I was a big XFL guy, and PJ Walker was the face of it. Would have been the unanimous MVP that one year we got to see it. I thought he also showed some nice things, getting some opportunities last year for the Panthers. Really good athlete, strong arm, relatively accurate. Just so much unknown there with PJ Walker. I would love to see him get some starts. Ideally, it's not here because you hope Sam Darnold can play 16 games for, I think, what would be the first time in his career. Keep an eye on him, I suppose. And then Will Grier is really not turned into anything here. They seem to want to play anybody but Will Grier, which is not a great sign after they spent, a third-round pick on him in 2019. So again, 23rd for the quarterback ranking, a heavy variable. I think Sam Darnold has, I don't think top 10 potential this year, maybe eventually could get there, but top 15 potential, which would obviously skyrocket the Panthers up 3, 4, maybe 5, 6, 7 rankings here, and maybe even get them into the playoff hunt. But but that's also going to depend on the rest of this roster here. So let's move on and get into it. The running back grade here going to be 4th in the league. No surprise with the return of Christian McCaffrey. Now, to be straightforward, I do weight the actual running ability slightly heavier than the receiving ability when I grade the running backs alone here. It's kind of a weird balance because we do factor the running backs a little bit into the receiving grade, which comes next, which is why, they come in 4th here. Christian McCaffrey is not the best running back in the NFL. He's the best halfback in the NFL is the way I like to describe it. As a runner, he's in my opinion, the 10 to 15 range. Panthers fans still think he's top 5, which, to each his own. I just see a lot of great runners in the NFL, and I wouldn't say Christian McCaffrey is in the conversation for the very best of them. He is still very, very good. He breaks arm tackles. He's obviously very shifty and has good vision. So you have no complaints about him as a runner. My only little poke there is that he's not Derrick Henry, he's not Dalvin Cook, he's not Nick Chubb as a runner, but you factor in the receiving ability there, and you can make a very, very strong argument that he is the most valuable running back in the NFL, and you'll see that contribute to the receiving grade as well. So you're very, very happy with Christian McCaffrey as your number 1 running back, and then they add Chuba Hubbard to the mix here in the 4th round. A very fascinating prospect in this most recent draft class, was in 2019 viewed as someone that should have declared, honestly, and would have been in the conversation with Clyde Edwards-Helaire and all those other running backs for being the best running back in that class. Just insane explosiveness. Think of maybe a combination of like Tevin Coleman and Raheem Mostert with the speed and the power. Good receiver as well. But in 2020, it wasn't the same. And in my opinion, his heart just wasn't in it. He had made this difficult decision to return to Oklahoma State, and then the season just gets derailed by COVID. And let's face it, running back, you got to pour your heart into it to be really good. You're getting beat up. You got to shrug 250, sometimes 300-pound men off of you. And I don't think his heart was in it at Oklahoma State last year. I think that can be rekindled, and he can be such a dominant number 2 complementary back to Christian McCaffrey. Some of his skill set with the speed and ability to break arm tackles is not entirely different, so they're not going to have to change up the scheme a ton when he comes in. He's only going to grade out as a 70 here alone because he was not great last year and he was a 4th round pick, but I do have heavy expectations for Chuba Hubbard. And maybe can take some of the running back load off of Christian McCaffrey so that he can stay healthy and be that premier receiving threat on 3rd downs. So I think that was a piece that they've wanted and have been missing. They have Rodney Smith as well, who was a great undrafted pickup, tough dude out of Minnesota, just lacks some of the athletic traits, but he can pick up some tough first downs. He gives you some of the lacking power that you do have in Christian McCaffrey and you do have in Chuba Hubbard. So a nice complementary piece to those other 2 guys. And then you're going to have a pretty big open competition here. Trenton Cannon played valiantly last year. I think they'll keep him around. And then do keep an eye on Spencer Brown. I had him tagged pre-draft as this year's James Robinson. Just the evaluation itself. I had almost an identical grade and the prototype type of player he is as that contact balance back. Just my scouting profile on him was almost identical. The athletic traits, the size, you name it. Obviously, the opportunity is a little different here. He's got at least 3 running backs clearly better than him. But I do like Spencer Brown, so keep an eye on him. And then the plebeians at the bottom, they're probably not going to make the team. So 4th at running back. And then you get to the receiving grade. You can already see that beautiful 99 for Christian McCaffrey for those watching here on YouTube. Just the best receiving running back ever, period. No questions. Don't debate it. He just is. He runs, if he was just a slot receiver, he would be in the conversation for one of the best route runners in the NFL, at least from the slot. He's got great hands. He makes tough catches. And then you pair that with such fluid hips, the ability to turn upfield just in the flip of a switch. Elite receiving threat, and is going to be probably the best weapon alone that Sam Darnold has ever had. But you could also say that about DJ Moore, who is the number one receiver here. It was a great tweet. I'm sorry I can't credit whoever it was, but someone was pointing out that DJ Moore has had 2 1,000-yard seasons with terrible quarterback play, and it's true. I mean, he's probably underrated. I love DJ Moore. I think he's very similar to Calvin Ridley, who was in that same draft class, both first-round picks, in that, I'm not fully on board with saying he is an alpha, but you're very happy with him as your best number one receiver. But I think if Sam Darnold hits here, we're going to very quickly be talking about DJ Moore as a true number one, top 10 receiver, alpha type. There's very little not to like about DJ Moore. I mean, he runs great routes. He is an insane athlete, almost underrated speed. He's right there with, say, Deebo Samuel and maybe Jamar Chase in the league now, as well with A.J. Brown as guys that are just impossible to tackle after the catch. So much to like with DJ Moore. Really excited to see him paired potentially with a good quarterback, but again, that's a question mark. So should be a big year for DJ Moore. You love having him there. And then Robbie Anderson is your number 2 prototype number 2 wide receiver. I mean, you want a guy on the outside who can get deep, but have enough in the short to intermediate game to keep you honest, whether it's running a dig route or a comebacker or turning it into a drag route, a hitch, you name it. He has a limited route tree, but he started to open that up a little bit last year with Joe Brady's play calling, which was really good to see. But Robbie Anderson is a perfect number 2 wide receiver. And then you bring in David Moore, who it was an interesting signing. I'm never going to question bringing in good receivers, which David Moore is, but very redundant with Robbie Anderson's skill set. So how do they fully use all these guys? It's going to be interesting. In 3 wide receiver packages, is DJ Moore the true slot guy, which is kind of how I would paint that picture. And you line that up with Robbie Anderson and David Moore on the outside, who are both guys that can keep you honest as a deep threat and mix in enough to, stop their momentum and run a hitch, run a comeback. That's really nice. And then DJ Moore to work over the middle of the field paired with what Christian McCaffrey is going to do as a slot receiver out of the backfield. That is a nice diversification of weapons and options there. So that's kind of how I would picture it, is DJ Moore being a guy that plays a lot from the slot, because Robbie Anderson and David Moore, that's not really their skill set. I will say Terrace Marshall did play a lot from the slot at LSU. Joe Brady familiar with Terrace Marshall. So I do think Terrace Marshall a little more raw. He's not a better receiver than David Moore now, but if they want the option to play DJ Moore on the outside more, God, you got DJ Moore, you got 2 Moores here, and then you also have 2 David Moores on this team. What a mess. But Terrace Marshall could come into the slot. You put DJ Moore outside with Robbie Anderson. Lots of options here. So excited to see Terrace Marshall develop as well. I mean, you could potentially have Terrace Marshall, DJ Moore being one of the big name wide receiver duos in the NFL. A lot of development still to see with Terrace Marshall, but he's got the athleticism, the size, good route running, but just not a lot of college production. Some unknowns there with Terrace Marshall. Part of the reason potentially he fell to the second round, on top of some injury questions as well. So I don't want to call him a boomer bust prospect, but just a young prospect with a lot of growth yet to see, which is why it's nice to have a David Moore there for a year. And then Sais Smith as well was a really sneaky good pick in the 6th round of a really deep wide receiver class. Someone with a really nice slot skill set. And I've actually said on some streams that don't be surprised if Sais Smith outproduces Terrace Marshall in the rookie season, because I do think that, yes, Terrace Marshall played in the slot at LSU, but I do think he projects best as a perimeter receiver in the NFL. And with that said, his skill set a little bit more redundant with David Moore and Robbie Anderson there. So I think there's actually a clearer path to playing time for Sais Smith in a lot of ways. And I think Sais Smith is a more polished player. Just doesn't have the physical traits and upside that Terrace Marshall had. So don't be stunned if Sais Smith comes in and gets more playing time than Terrace Marshall right away. It does not mean Terrace Marshall's a bust. It does not mean Sais Smith is going to be a better player than Terrace Marshall. Just maybe more of a high floor, low ceiling type of prospect. And then you've got, probably 4 guys competing for a 6th spot on this team. Zylstra, Kirkwood, Omar Bayless had some amazing catches in college, hasn't been able to replicate that in the NFL. Ventrell Bryant, a really good athlete. Matt Rule loves throwing nods to his Temple guys. So, one of those guys will make the team. And then the tight end group, another competition. You bring in Dan Arnold, who is a converted receiver. He's really just a big-bodied receiver that's listed as a tight end, not much of a blocker. But the tight end position in Joe Brady's offense isn't all that critical. And Dan Arnold can make some plays as a reliable pair of hands. Probably the best, other than David Moore maybe, the best go up and get it guy. Could be a red zone threat for Darnold. So just another weapon. And I have a tweet from 2018 when Dan Arnold was on the Saints. And I was like, we are getting robbed of the Jets picking up Dan Arnold from the Saints practice squad and us getting Sam Darnold to Dan Arnold. So really happy to see that combination, Sam Darnold to Dan Arnold. You got DJ Moore, David Moore. The right guard could be David Moore. It's just a freaking mess, but I love it. Then you have Tommy Tremble, a third-round pick this year, who in a lot of ways is similar to Terrace Marshall as far as his evaluation in that, not a super productive college player, but you look at the traits and say, as an NFL coach, I can work with that. I can develop him in the same way that the Niners did with George Kittle, that the Bills have with a Dawson Knox, Foster Moreau. Just get the athlete at tight end with the size and the blocking ability and the athleticism to get open and develop some of that route running, scheme him open, and hope his hands are good and he's tough after the catch. And that's Tommy Tremble in a nutshell. I do think he's going to compete and potentially even get more true tight end reps than Dan Arnold, actually hand in the dirt blocking role reps, whereas Dan Arnold may be more that big slot type. So an interesting hybrid there, but nothing crazy to expect in year one. Ian Thomas sucks. And Colin Thompson is the fourth tight end there, and I think that's going to be it. Sullivan, someone who Joe Brady is familiar with, who he worked with at LSU. They bring him in. He was a receiver at LSU, kind of working on that Darren Waller-esque project type. I don't see it with Sullivan, but I didn't see it with Darren Waller either. And then the running back, obviously Christian McCaffrey is going to benefit this grade, which by the way is 15th in the NFL. A top half receiving core in the NFL in the year 2021 is saying a lot. There are a ton of good receiving cores in the league right now. So to be top half is a big step up for Sam Darnold. And Christian McCaffrey is just such a weapon. We really talked about him a lot already, but you're going to see that big 99 as a receiving impact here at that running back position. So big help there. And then Chuba Hubbard, the rookie there. And Trenton Cannon can do some nice things if anything were to happen to Christian McCaffrey. And Chuba Hubbard can't really fill in as that pass protecting role. The one spot here that is possibly the biggest reason that the Panthers are maybe lower for me than what Panthers fans might want to see is this offensive line. And they're actually going to rank 29th at the offensive line. This was where I was really underwhelmed by what this team did over this offseason. I thought they could have done a lot better, and they kind of dropped the ball a little bit. Just with free agency, maybe. But anyway, your tackle duo is going to be Brady Christensen, a third-round rookie out of BYU, and Taylor Moton. So Taylor Moton is one of the better right tackles in the NFL in a contract year, playing on the franchise tag. He's to me a top 10 right tackle. You can count on him. He's your best piece here. He's a mauler. He's got awesome grip strength. He's really developed that technique. So no question marks there. He is the reason this ranks 29th, because the rest of this, other than Matt Paradise at center, is very much up in the air. So Brady Christensen, a nice third-round pick. I thought he had some of the best technique in this class. I did like Brady Christensen, but he's a third-round tackle. And to count on him as a rookie, as a guy that is coming from a lower level of competition and is undersized and has short arms, that is suspect. Just to count on that for Sam Darnold. I'm not saying he can't be good. I'm not saying he can't be really good. I think there's some similarities to David Bakhtiari as a prospect, who was a fourth-round pick for the Packers. So I'm not writing Brady Christensen off, but as a rookie, it's really difficult to expect high-end play from Brady Christensen. So a 67 grade for him. I do like the center, Matt Paradise, but a 79 is honestly generous for how he's played since leaving Denver and being that big free agent signing 2 years ago. You hope with better help he can get back to that level, but he's been an average at best center since getting to Carolina. So it's possible that just the lingering effects of getting to work with Peyton Manning had worn off, and he's just, an average center, and 79 is just overranking him. But I do believe in him. And then the guard situation, this is where I really thought the Panthers could have done more, whether it was in the draft or through free agency. Because right out the gate, two of the first signings in free agency period were Pat Elflein and Cameron Erving. So Erving, to me, after drafting Brady Christensen, is going to be a backup tackle. And he's not bad as a swing man, sixth man. So that signing there isn't the end of the world after you got Christensen. But the Pat Elflein signing was really where I was disappointed and kind of throwing some shots at this front office that I had big expectations for this offseason. Not so much that the contract is going to ruin their franchise and that, is like the equivalent of the Lions giving Hal Vaitai 5 years, $50 million. It was more so that that was kind of them saying it was enough money that was them saying Pat Elflein is our left guard this year. And that's really disappointing from an evaluation standpoint that they looked at this and on the first day of free agency, that's what they decided. He's terrible in pass protection. The worst guard in the last 4 years, consistently in pass protection. He got cut from the Vikings. The Vikings cut Pat Elflein, and then the Jets picked him up. He started there because, like we talked about, the Jets are a train wreck. And he was bad in pass protection for the Jets. Half decent run blocker, but not a good enough run blocker to make up for his pass protection. So that left side of the line, Sam Darnold's blind side, that's the thing, man. That's the one area I'm looking at is Brady Christensen, Pat Elflein at left guard. I'm worried for Sam Darnold if that's what they're doing. So keep an eye on that. You got John Miller at right guard too, who I don't know if he starts necessarily. They do have some other pieces. He's a very, very low-end starter, if that, probably more in the replacement level backup caliber. So you've got some straight-up bad starters on the field for this offensive line. You hope Matt Paradise, Taylor Moton can elevate that, but offensive line, to me, is much more about having 5 quality players as opposed to, 2 good players and 3 bad ones. The depth is actually pretty solid here. We mentioned Cam Erving is a good swingman and insurance for if Brady Christensen really sucks. He can step in and get in some people's way. You got Greg Little, second-round pick in 2019. He has not been good, but there is a path for him to still develop or to slide into guard and be an upgrade to Pat Elflein. But with the money they gave Elflein, I do think he starts at guard. Dennis Daly, probably their best left guard option. If he starts over Pat Elflein, it's probably better, but he's far from good. And then you have the combination of Deonte Brown and David Moore, who are really interesting just body types at the guard position. I think David Moore is 6'2", Deonte Brown I think is 6'3", and they're both over 350 pounds. Moore might be 330, but they are just short, stocky maulers. They have amazing grip strength, but really slow, choppy feet. I don't want them out there in their rookie season, but both those guys have developmental upside, and the beauty is, anything that the offensive line coach here has to tell Deonte Brown, they're going to have to coach the same thing to David Moore. So those guys can kind of grow together, compete against each other. A 6th-round pick for Brown, undrafted pickup for David Moore. I had those two guys really tight on my draft board. So good additions, but not something you're counting on in year one. And then no one else really worth talking about after that. To me, this is one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. I thought this was an underwhelming offseason. Maybe they can still bring Russell Okung back or add someone else, or maybe find another guard in free agency. I don't know. It seems unlikely at this point. I think this is the group that they want to roll with, and I have some serious questions, and I don't even see a ton of upside because I like Brady Christensen. I just don't think it's going to happen in year one to be this great tackle, and then the guard situation is just so bad. So, yeah, 29th at offensive line, and this is one of my hold-ups with this team as a whole. But that said, the offense is still going to rank 21st here. I do expect a good unit here with these receivers and Joe Brady and his West Coast kind of balanced offense and some uptick in Sam Darnold's play as well. And then I do rank the offensive coaching 14th Joe Brady in his second year, that's a pretty nice spot to be. One of the top head coach candidates, and I will say this team is definitely at risk of losing Joe Brady, which I hope for their sake is not going to be a Kyle Shanahan, Dan Quinn situation. But I also think Matt Rule is a much better coach than Dan Quinn ever was. And then we're going to transition now to the defensive side of the ball. You know, the offensive line is a worry for me. The variable of Sam Darnold is a question mark. And then I go back and forth with this defense as well. I almost think this defense is similar to Sam Darnold, like very boom or bust, a lot of youth and potential and upside, but it's just difficult to, expect the best from this defense. So they're going to rank 25th. Let's go ahead and run through why. So the run defense was definitely an area of weakness. They were in the bottom, really 2 or 3 of run defenses last year. And I'm expecting some growth here, ranking them 27th. It starts with the interior here. Derek Brown was not good in run defense, was, honestly getting moved off his spot more than you expect, not really two gapping, which is what they were hoping he could do in year one. Expecting some growth there. He's a great run defender at Auburn. I think he can get there. It's just difficult to expect a rookie to be what they asked of him last year, so certainly you can project some growth there. And then Daquan Jones next to him. So they let Zach Kerr go. I would say it's maybe a push. Zach Kerr is a really good run defender. Daquan Jones is really good in his own right. I would say it's a slight downgrade, but it maybe is a push with Derek Brown expecting some growth in year 2. So I did like that signing. That's kind of exactly what you want to do with your number 2 defensive tackle for a run defense role, is just find a cheap veteran that'll play with discipline and has the size and strength to do it. So a nice addition there that should help. And then the depth here, you got Bravion Roy and Davion Nixon, I think will be primarily the rotation. Bravion Roy in year 2, I expect some growth. He also really struggled in run defense. And then Davion Nixon, Panthers fans might have some crazy expectations for him. A lot of pre-draft looks for him had him second round. Some analysts had him as the number 1 defensive tackle in this class. He was actually one of my not my guys. For those that followed my pre-draft analysis, I had a late 3rd, early 4th round grade on him. Had also heard some buzz about off-field stuff for him, which could have led to a quote-unquote fall. But to see him in the 5th round wasn't all that surprising to me. It's still good value that late, though. He was a really nice run defender at Iowa. I like how he fits in the rotation here. Just as a pass rusher, didn't really love what I saw. He's got some decent get-off, some decent kind of one-gap explosiveness to kind of shoot stuff, but I'm just not expecting him to develop into a good pass rusher. I think he's going to be a 3rd or 4th rotational defensive tackle that can play the run. It's kind of what my pre-draft analysis on him was, and I'm going to stick with that. A 5th round pick, it's probably what you can expect. So I don't know what Panthers fans' expectations are for him, and if they think he's this crazy steal, I wouldn't go that far. But it was a good pick in the 5th round. You got Karan Reed, who's a rotational veteran, should make the team and get some looks and contribute. And then a 7th round pick on Phil Hoskins. Don't want to spend a ton of time talking about him because he was a 7th round pick, but a unique player to watch. A thin lower body, massive upper body. Plays with no discipline against the run and also gets moved off his spot really well because he doesn't have a great anchor in his lower body. But as a pass rusher, had a fun approach to watch. He would take a step back, chop his feet, and then start to bull rush. Just totally signaling what he wanted to do as a pass rusher. Occasionally you'd see some wins with that, but just highly inconsistent because everyone knew it was coming. Total project, maybe a practice squad piece here. Maybe makes the team, I don't know, but that was a draft pick for them. So that's the interior group. It's fine. I think you expect some growth. And then the edge here, it's not a great run defense. Brian Burns, do keep in mind this is a run defense grade, Panthers fans. Don't freak out. 71 grade for Brian Burns. He's just never going to be a great run defender. To expect him to be that would be wasting his potential. To ask him to beef up so he can play the run would be a waste because his get off and speed off the edge is what makes him such a great pass rusher. So he's just never going to be a dominant run defender with how tall and lengthy he is. Guys are just, tackles are just going to get underneath him and be able to move him. So it is what it is. You're going to be fine with it when he's as good of a pass rusher as he is. Yetur Gross-Matos, on the other hand, you're expecting him to be maybe a little more balanced run defending backside defensive end. And with his size, you hope he can take a step up. The 73 grade for him is projecting some growth there. and I think he can do that. So hoping he can be better than last year, because teams were getting the edge all day against the Panthers, and it's not like Gross Matos was a full-time player last year. And then the edge depth, Morgan Fox, probably going to take that pass rushing specialist role that he had for the Rams. I don't expect a ton from him, but maybe in a different role here and more of a 4-3-esque defense. And I know they run some 3-4 stuff too. They're very multiple. But maybe a different role. Morgan Fox shows some different things as a run defending edge guy and can rotate in for Brian Burns maybe. Marquise Haynes, not a run defender. Christian Miller, we haven't gotten to see a lot from him. And Austin Larkin, not expecting much there. The linebackers here, they're hoping for an increase with this group, bringing in Denzel Perriman. Only played about 350, 400 snaps for the Chargers. I think, was also, in addition to being injured as he typically is, was playing a bit of a rotational base linebacker role there. But regardless, when he's on the field, he brings that nasty, old-school mentality, and he should be an upgrade from anything they had at that linebacker position last year from a run defense standpoint. So nice little signing there, something they didn't have with this linebacking group, because you got Shaq Thompson, a converted safety from Washington. He's just not a big guy. It's not his mindset is to, buy into the run. He's maybe a guy that's going to be a little more conservative against play action, which you want, by the way. It's not a bad thing. So a more natural role as a complement, a side piece to Denzel Perriman, not even a complementary piece. And then you're going to have a mix of Hassan Reddick and Jermaine Carter, depending on, what packages they're running in this multiple front. Again, I list them 4-3. There's going to be some 3-4 in there as well. I get it. But Hassan Reddick going to play kind of that hybrid off-ball edge role here. They do like some of the kind of Big 12-esque 3-3-5 stuff where they almost play those edge rushers 2 or 3 yards off the line of scrimmage, and that's perfect for Hassan Reddick. So I'm definitely interested to see how they decide to use him. I mentioned Matt Rule loves throwing his Temple guys a bone. I think that's more of what we see here, but I do think he also has a plan for him in a specific role in this defense. He's not a great pass rusher like his sack numbers last year indicate, but and he's not a good cover player. He's not a good run defender. He's just kind of this interesting hybrid athlete. And then you have Jermaine Carter, who showed some nice flashes last year. He was actually the highest graded linebacker on this team last year, so I list him as depth, but he could very well be in there, especially if Perriman has a hard time staying healthy. You'll see him step in as kind of the true second linebacker there. And then if they ever went like a true base 4-3, I think you'd see Jermaine Carter as that strong side linebacker as opposed to Hassan Reddick. So those guys will kind of mix it around. Frankie Lavu, very redundant with Hassan Reddick. Actually a better run defender, though. Julian Stafford, a veteran, probably just a special teamer. And then Clay Johnston, Patty Fisher, some kind of scrappy, unathletic linebackers there that will be competing for the team. So 27th for run defense. Let's move on and talk about the pass rush. Super polarizing group here. Let's start with Brian Burns. So that grade goes up to an 87 when you talk about his pass rushing, and he honestly has expectations to shatter that this year. A breakout candidate, a sleeper defensive player of the year candidate, was on fire in the second half of last season. Was really good throughout the season, but man, he looked like a lengthy, taller version of Von Miller. I just have crazy expectations. Now, we need to see more of it. We need to see the growth. I expect him to outperform this 87 grade, but he also doesn't have like amazing power, and there's a potential reason in there to think that he can't repeat, or I don't want to say can't, doesn't repeat the season he had last year. I think he does. I think he plays better, but we just need to see it is all I'm saying. I really like Brian Burns. I just called him a defensive player of the year candidate, so don't take that the wrong way, Panthers fans. I'm just being straightforward. And then Yetur Gross-Matos on the other side. Someone, again, you're projecting growth. I think he can be a balanced number 2 edge complement. Oh, man, if you need a comp, maybe he can become like an Olivier Vernon would be something like his upside. Good power rusher, some kind of get off to get the edge, and then you hope he takes a step up as a run defender. Just a good, balanced, good athlete guy with a lot of upside, but I just don't ever see him becoming like an alpha pass rusher. I don't really have a great reason why, but that's probably part of why the NFL saw him as a second-round pick. And then the interior here, Derek Brown really came on in the second half as a pass rusher, and a 79 grade as a pass rusher here. I really think he outperforms that as well. I think you watch him play, and he's similar in a lot of ways to Akeem Hicks and Kenny Clark. Just overwhelming force, get off, strength, arm length in the middle. And it's just so easy to win when you have the traits that he has. I don't really get why in the draft people were knocking his athleticism. He is a well above average athlete for a defensive tackle. No, he doesn't run a 4.7 or anything, but I don't care if my defensive tackle runs a 4.7. I care if he can get off the ball and dominate with strength on the inside. So I expect growth from Derek Brown, Yetur Gross-Matos, Brian Burns. They rank 17th for the pass rush, which is obviously very good, like right in the middle. This definitely is top 10 pass rush upside if you get the growth that you hope for from this young group. But kind of like we said with Sam Darnold, we got to, keep it even for everybody. I can't just assume the Panthers have this amazing growth that we expect to see, but we still need to see it. We can't just assume the Panthers get that and don't assume the same thing for the other teams. Daquan Jones may or may not be the interior rusher here. He might be more of that early down run piece, because they bring in Morgan Fox, who played a pass rush specialist role for the Rams, and I really thought about putting him up there instead of Daquan Jones. It's just difficult to say how they're going to use him because his weight has fluctuated all over the place. So he's listed at 6'3", 260 right now on the Panthers website. So I don't think that's like a full-time second interior rusher. I think, sub-package types of stuff, definitely. So curious to see how they use Morgan Fox in this rotation. And then Hassan Reddick as well, had to kind of slide him into the edge when you talk about pass rush downs. So do we see maybe Yetur Gross-Matos play some 4-eye with Hassan Reddick off the edge? They have flexibility with this group, and it's going to be interesting to see how Matt Rule decides to use these guys. And then also Marquise Haynes, and made some plays last year. Not a consistent rusher, but has some get off and bend around the edge. And I still want to see some stuff from Christian Miller as well. I thought he was a nice 4th round pick out of Alabama, and going to have a hard time getting on the field here, but maybe something there if he ever does. So the pass rush, again, ranks 17th in the league. Definitely top 10 upside with this pass rush. Panthers fans, I am not ignoring the upside here, but you just, like I said, you can't just assume the Panthers get that growth and nobody else does, even though I think it might be more likely that the Panthers do, because I think it's a really nice lineup with Burns, Brown, and Matos, and some of those interior pieces to mix around as well. So 17th, to me, the best part of this defense for now, but the rest of this group also grades out pretty well. So 18th for linebacker here. Shaq Thompson, definitely a down year last year, just wasn't making the impact in coverage. And I think you can expect some regression to the mean there. Got a really nice contract. He's a good player. Grades out as 78. Good linebacker. Denzel Perriman. Hard to fully count on him to stay healthy. And, he had some big plays in coverage last year, actually, but he's never been a high-end cover player. So does Jermaine Carter become more of the third down linebacker, the nickel linebacker? You also, Jeremy Chin here as well. So you have options. It's not like you're forced to play Denzel Perriman in a cover role. And then Hassan Reddick, again, hybrid player. Just, that's all I really have to say about him. I'm not expecting him to play like a coverage linebacker role, but you got to kind of factor him into that kind of outside backer. We don't really know how he's going to be used. He's just an athletic, flexible piece that if you put his athleticism in the right position, he can make some plays. Everyone else we've kind of already talked about, so it's just a good, solid linebacking group. Could be better, could be a lot worse here. Let's move on to the defensive backs. Very similar outlook in a lot of ways to the pass rush, so I don't think the upside is quite as large as the pass rush is, because I think they have one glaring weakness on this secondary, and that's free safety. So we'll get to that. But you got Dante Jackson, I still think is classified as this team's number 1 corner. Nice year last year. It was thought of coming out of LSU as more of a man-to-man guy, but he's actually shown to have good zone instincts. And the Panthers under Matt Rule ran about as much zone coverage as anyone in the league. I think they were like 29th in man coverage amount of times they ran it last year. So Had a good year last year. I think they really like him as their number one corner, even though they're adding some other pieces because they just needed other pieces next to him. So I do like Dante Jackson, though he can be a little aggressive and get out of position at times. But I'll live with that because he's a playmaker. And then J.C. Horn, the number 2 corner here. And I got to be careful with what I'm about to say because I think I gave this like a B- grade. I really like J.C. Horn, true first-round grade. Love the scheme fit for a team that ran more zone coverage than anyone in the NFL. Well, almost as much as anybody in the NFL last year. So I think he's going to be a very good player. My only thing is I think there's expectations that he's going to be like Jalen Ramsey in year 1, and I'm just not there. For one, rookie corners just in general don't typically come into the league and dominate. People thought that Jeffrey Okudah was going to be Stephon Gilmore in year 1, and he was not even a starting caliber player. So, I think he's going to play full-time as the number 2 corner here, which makes A.J. Bouye the number 3 corner. None of these 3 are true slot guys. So there's just question marks is all. I'm only bringing that up because I've heard Panthers fans think this is like a top 5 secondary, and I can't picture that in year 1 with these corners. There's obviously immense upside with J.C. Horn and Dante Jackson. This could eventually become the best cornerback duo in the NFL with their athletic ability and everything. But I'm just kind of being honest with my expectations here. J.C. Horn was actually technically my 4th corner. With Caleb Farley's injury questions, I did have him 3rd, and then depending on what kind of scheme you wanted to run, he could have been your 2nd corner. I did think Patrick Surtain is a better prospect and will be a better corner, honestly. That's just my opinion. So that's why I gave it a B- pick. But I still think he's going to be a really good player someday. I'm trying to lower expectations a little bit because I don't think he's going to be this elite corner in year 1. I think there's going to be some struggles. My comp for him was Marcus Peters, so very good NFL corner. And then A.J. Bouye becomes the number 3. Again, how do these pieces all mix together if all 3 are on the field? I don't really love any 3 of these in the slot necessarily. It'd probably be Dante Jackson would have the skill set to be that piece. But then you're trading off some speed on the perimeter. Do you have another Rasul Douglas situation where A.J. Bouye is just getting beat over the top? Just adds some different elements to the mix here. Troy Pride is someone you really hope takes another year to kind of develop with a veteran in A.J. Bouye there, because Troy Pride could be like a dominant 3rd slot piece here with Jackson and Horn, and that trio would be super fun and super athletic. So I do like Troy Pride. Was really up and down, but did get to see a lot of playing time down the stretch and showed some nice flashes. So I like Troy Pride. Just probably going to be kind of a dime corner here, which is a nice spot for him to develop in his 2nd season and maybe eventually reach that upside. And then you have Rashaan Melvin. Does he make the team with A.J. Bouye there? Debatable, because you got 3 other guys here. Stanley Thomas Oliver and Miles Hartfield, who kind of mixed in last year and looked like decent depth, and that's probably what they'll be, but could do worse. And then Keith Taylor, really lengthy perimeter corner out of Washington, again fitting that narrative that maybe they want to press even more this year. So, good group of corners, really good group of corners, and some question marks as far as how good is J.C. Horn going to be as a rookie. How does that slot piece work out? Because I don't see those top 3 guys having a true slot corner skill set. But yeah, the upside in the future of this secondary looks outstanding. But as I like to say, in September of 2021, is this a dominant group of corners? I wouldn't describe it as dominant, no. And then the safety groups, this is actually where I have some concern. Not with Jeremy Chin, but Jeremy Chin's kind of that bandit type of safety. Moves all over the place, plays some linebacker, covers tight ends, can run those curl flats. Was so fun to watch last year. Was definitely in the defensive player of the year defensive rookie of the year conversation. And I think he's just going to continue to get better. Came from a low level of competition and wearing so many different hats. Like, he was not asked to play an easy role. And by the end of the year, he was so comfortable. Maybe, showed some struggles early on, but at least in coverage. But, man, I'm super optimistic about Jeremy Chin. I don't think he's like a perfect cover player right now. There's just so much for him still to learn, and he has to play so many different positions that he's going to develop and grow in time. fully believe in that. He's not this elite strong safety right now, especially with coverage question marks, but he can get there. But he's not this rangy free safety either. And they kind of had that in Trey Boston, who was still pretty good last year. And who's playing that role here? Like, I'm recording this about 6 days before I post it, so maybe they sign an Earl Thomas by then, which would be amazing. But Justin Burris is your free safety? Are you serious? What? Sam Franklin, Delano Hill, Kenny Robinson, they don't have a good deep safety right now for a team that ran as much cover 3 as anybody in the league last year. So that doesn't add up to me if they really believe in these guys. Justin Burris is a third safety at best, kind of a flexible piece. Sam Franklin made some plays last year, but mostly as a run defender, not so much as a coverage player. Delano Hill, more of that strong safety prototype. Kenny Robinson, maybe the only guy with upside as a free safety here. Played that role really well in the XFL, but that's far from doing it in the NFL. So, I'm just going to be honest. I have some serious questions about the free safety situation. This secondary gave up a ton of big plays last year, and I think they're at risk of doing it again this year over the top for different reasons. But it's a question mark, and it's going to drag down this ranking because the cornerback group alone, I think, is in the 10 to 12, maybe even higher range. But it's dragged down by the coverage ability of these safeties. Because even Jeremy Chin, he's not some elite coverage safety. I think he's a really good coverage strong safety, but you get the point there with Jeremy Chin. So 17th for the defensive backs, and again, somewhere you could see them exceed that ranking somewhat easily. So you combine some of these question marks, you combine the kind of squishiness of the front in run defense, a defensive coaching staff that showed some promise but still has a lot of proving to do, a home field that's, it's an outdoor stadium. It's not the most electric home field, which is an underrated aspect of good, tough defense. And you come out with the 25th defense in the league. Very easily, you could end up with a top 10 pass rush, a top 12-ish secondary, top 15 secondary. They play better run defense, and this is a top half defense in the league next year. If that happens, if Sam Darnold reaches his upside, my goodness, this Panthers team is in business. But that's a lot to expect. It's a lot to project. And I just can't do it for the purpose of this series, which is why they come in 26th overall. The special teams, very balanced as well. Joey Sly got a boot on him. They've got a good culture for the special teams as well. So it's just a matter of continued growth. This team is amidst a rebuild, and I think they're going to be one of the more polarizing, fun teams to watch in the NFL this season. And then recapping the strengths and weaknesses one more time here. So to me, a strength for this team is just like polarizing upside. You look at so many different position groups, and they have the athleticism and the youth and reasons to believe that this could all click at some point, and all of a sudden you're talking about one of the more talented young teams in the league. It's just a matter of when does that happen? Is it this year? Is it next year? I think it will happen at some point in that window. It's just when is it going to be? But then the offensive play calling, I think, is absolutely a strength. I love just Joe Brady's feel as a play caller. He knows when to call a screen, when to mix up his running games, when it's time to call a shot. He's got a good, balanced West Coast offense that we didn't spend a ton of time talking about. It's very much a pro-style sort of balanced spread type of offense. Yeah, I think that's a total strength is the offensive play calling. And again, playmaking and speed on offense. The combination of DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey trying to cover and tackle those two players is such a headache. And then you have guys like David Moore and Robbie Anderson just kind of like fleas on the outside that you always have to keep an eye on. Terrace Marshall in the mix there, Shai Smith. They have a handful of playmakers that, with utilized correctly with the offensive play calling, can be a total headache for defenses. And then the weaknesses for this team, a lot of it comes down to line play, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I am worried about the offensive line. It's got to be the biggest reason I'm lower on this team than Panthers fans were probably hoping for. And then run defense as well. should see some growth there, but they have a long way to go. They were one of the worst run defenses in the league last year. Deep safety, a surefire concern for me. By the time this video gets posted, they might have a better free safety, so we'll see. And then just overall youth and unknowns, including unknowns at the quarterback position. It's got to be a weakness. To expect everything to go right here, it's just unlikely. You're probably going to have some of these young players not reach or be the players that you were hoping they could be. So it's just kind of wait and see with a lot of these guys. Then the schedule outlook here, talking about my over-under predictions with the Vegas over-under of 7.5 for this team, which puts them right in this 24 to 27 range as far as what Vegas thinks. So really easy start to their schedule, and I've actually got them starting 3-0. So if they start 3-0, I don't want Panthers fans to come in here and be like, oh my God, you were so wrong about this team. We're headed to the playoffs. No, it just turns out you got an easy start to your schedule because I've got them ripping off 6 losses in a row after that. A really rough stretch. Some winnable games in there for sure. At Dallas, Philly, Minnesota, at the Giants, at Atlanta. Certainly winnable games in there. So I'm not saying that's a surefire thing. You could start 3-0, get hot. Everyone looks good. Sam Darnold is on the same page, and you could absolutely beat Dallas, Philadelphia, Minnesota, the Giants, and Atlanta, even New England. Yeah, totally. That's a very generous start to their schedule for a team that kind of needs that momentum. So definitely keep an eye on that. And then you've got at Arizona, I gave them a loss. Washington, at Miami, pretty tough games there. You get your bye week, and then you finish with kind of the meat on your schedule. You do have Atlanta at home, which I gave them a win, but then at Buffalo, you got to play the Super Bowl champs twice, and at New Orleans, I have them finishing 1-4 on the back stretch there. So that does come out with a very pessimistic 5-12 outlook for this team. That to me is their floor. If you couldn't tell, I have an optimistic outlook for this team's future. 2021, I'm not expecting a crazy season for them. I think you do see the growth throughout the year. But I do think 5 wins is their floor. I think 9 wins is their ceiling. I still have a hard time seeing this being a playoff team. There's just so much youth and uncertainty. And again, the Sam Darnold factor is so big here as well. So a truly unique deep dive into this team. It bothers me a little bit that I had to rank them 26th because I do want to be fair to every team. But this is a team that I'm personally really excited to watch. I'm rooting for. And I don't want Panthers fans to focus too much on the 26th ranking for this team because I think they have so much potential to exceed that. And I'm certainly worried that this is going to be something we look back on and, they're an 8 or a 9 win team next year. And, it just ranking them 26 just looks bad. And I honestly genuinely hope that happens. So really excited to watch this Panthers team this year. So many fun players and upside. And I'm a Sam Darnold guy myself. So going to be definitely a Game Pass team. Well, I watch every game, but definitely a team that I'm excited to dial back all the games and dive into next year. So hope you enjoyed the deep dive, guys. I am currently out of town as you're watching this. So the next deep dive is going to be up, Sunday, Monday. A little bit longer windows for these deep dives this week. But do hit that like button down below if you enjoyed. I hope you did. And we'll see you guys for the next one. Peace out.